Everything is on the table. It's Relationship Theory with Tina Laws.
Welcome back to Relationship Theory with your host, Tina Laws, and our amazing guest, Lawanda Ball. And before we went on break, we talked a little bit about her first and second divorce and how she felt, how her children felt. And we was on her second divorce and how her children felt at that point. We already heard how they felt after the first divorce, and knowing that you got remarried, mommy, they just wanted you to be happy. To find out now, mom is going through this experience all over again. And you know, children, they think about it way differently from how we're looking at it, because you're going through your own situation. Before we talk about how you managed it, how did your children fare?
I think, well, with my daughter, her fear was stability. Because with being with her dad for so long, and then this new guy, she was feeling unstable. So just speaking to her, and when we separated and I moved up my mom's, I guess with the having my mom and me, and then her brother, who also, we all work, she felt stable again.
Yes.
So when my second husband said that he is going to divorce, and I moved out and got my own apartment, and the three of us are now having to be with each other again, it was a transition of learning us again, just the three of us. And it became, where now she is going 20, we're all adults.
Yes.
So now we are so open and we talk about everything that it just is so, the knit is like, I don't think anybody can break that knit. And from their, I guess, thinking, because when the divorce happened, they sat me down.
Yes.
And they was like, we don't want you to go through this ever again. So it was like seeing it through their eyes made me look at it even more so of self.
Yes. I love it, Lawanda. I love it, love it, love it. So let's talk a little bit about, so we know how your children feel and how they felt along the way. How did you feel? Because on break we talked a bit about how you were really blaming yourself. Now, we talked earlier about, you know, you was able to pinpoint, it was communication. You knew what role you played in both divorces. But let's go back again before we can come back forward. Let's talk about how you truly felt when you knew you was getting a divorce the first time and second.
Both sides, it looked at, I really did blame myself. And I beat myself up really bad until one day I just looked in the mirror and I said, it's not just me. There is accountability for choices, but I also looked at it that there are roles that you play within a marriage. And I looked at my role, and instead of blaming myself, I just took accountability for the choices that I made that I could have made differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And as it relates to the choices you made, you know, what did that prompt in you? You know, moving forward now, we know who you are, but when you were in that spot, what were some of the things that helped you to recognize, hold up, I'm not at fault here, and I do have a choice moving forward? What are some of the things that you did?
Well, I like I said, I did a lot of self-reflecting. I looked at, for every action, there's a reaction. So I started to practice on my own reactions to stuff. And not everything's done at you. Yes. And not everything's done to you. So I just learned to react to different things differently. Because we all had childhood dramas that we carry. Yes. And for me, I would say a few years ago, I started that journey on self, and I started to look at how Lawanda became Lawanda. So the different choices that I was making was based off of how Lawanda would have acted at 13, how Lawanda would have acted at 18, and looked at it from that aspect that, wait a minute, you're an adult. So it's not about, okay, well, I did this because of this. Because at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility that you could have chose a different way. So again, it's just, for me, was practicing on the reactions to stuff and not reacting bitterly.
Yeah, and part of us being able to recognize the reactions or anything that we need to do differently is we have to go to the stem of it, right? The root. Where did it come from? And you mentioned earlier the childhood drama, you know, and traumas, the things in which affected you. And so what allowed you to say, you know what, you was able to reflect and say, you know what, this is something I did when I was a young girl as a result of A, B, C, and D. So when did you sit back and say, hold up, I'm actually operating as though I'm still that 8-year-old, having to be liked or having to be obedient or whatever the reasons are?
Correct. So that's exactly it. Those were the reasons. I became that people pleaser, not knowing that that's what I was doing because of the childhood traumas that I went through. So learning those pieces, it helped me to take a step back and say, hold on, you don't have to say yes. You can say no. But it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So how it lands on the other person was a big thing for me, because at the end of the day, it's how you say it. Because you can speak how you feel, but it's how you say it and how it's received.
And we know we cannot control how people receive anything, right? That's one thing we do know. You know, as much as you try to say, I really didn't mean it that way, they've already received it, so you might as well just let that go. So as we talk about your childhood and leading up to your first marriage and your second marriage, would you say there were any differences in the ways in which you presented yourself as a result of your childhood traumas or dramas?
Correct. So with the first one, and I didn't know about half the stuff because it was after that divorce that had me to take a step back and look at some of those things. So of course, going into marriage number 2, there were some things that I recognized as they happened. It's like, okay, you don't have to act, or you don't have to react, and it's not the little girl anymore. It's the adult. So with doing that in between the marriages, it helped me to look at the second marriage differently.
And what's one of the things you'll say you did differently from, I know you mentioned about being more of a vocal person in your second marriage. You know, you were no longer going to sit and allow anybody to tell you anything. You're going to beat them to it. You're going to start it and end it, and don't just give them a little bit in the middle. What's some of the other things you learned from your first marriage going into your second?
Like I said, it's just a matter of listening to them. Like I said, it was sort of kind of listening, but not listening. So the difference was, like I said, it was like I spoke up, and it helped. But again, it didn't help because I spoke up just a tad bit too much. And you talked about being a people pleaser, right? So let's talk about your second marriage. When you went into your second marriage, although you are now more vocal, you're still that person that wanted to please, right? And so what's one of the things you'll say that you found that was kind of a clash, I guess, as it relates to your ex-husband and his wanted to express himself, but he knew he could probably minimally express himself, and you'll finish it. But what's another area in your marriage that you saw like, wow, you know, I'm overly trying to please this man? Well, I overly please in every area, so that's why it's sort of kind of difficult to pinpoint exactly which one, because I wanted to please. I just wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to leave me, that he wasn't going to, you know, not be happy. So I tried to do everything to make him happy, but again, the dominance of the communication and not allowing him to be him per se, because, you know, when you join together as I say, you join together and be one, but it's not when you're standing there. It takes work, it takes time, it takes growing. And it was, at the end of the day, like I said, it's just that I know the communication piece really was, like I said, I made sure I didn't not say how I felt, because I didn't want to be in the same predicament as the first. But then again, it was just overly communicated.
What would you say now you're in your second marriage? And most of us, you get married once, you want it to work, right? And so now in your second marriage, your children not wanting you to ever go through that again. I knew they said that after this one. But what were some of the things that you think you compromised to stay in that marriage, even though you saw it probably going downhill as a result of the communication or whatever else? What are some of the things you compromised to stay in that relationship?
I compromised my values. I compromised the things that I like to do. I compromised just myself, you know, not being completely authentic with myself. I wanted to just be everything about him and for him. So yeah, I compromised everything.
So you'll say you kind of lost yourself in him.
Correct.
So that's part of, let's going back to the beginning when we talked about your first marriage and second marriage, and now how amazing you have become as a result. One of the things you'll say is that you lost yourself in that in both relationships, one way or the other. So let's talk a little bit about how you started to climb out of that hill of pleasing, and although you're always going to be that person, I'm sure, but how did you climb out of that hill?
Climbing out of that hill, I actually became a people person versus a people pleaser.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Relationship Theory. We'll be right back after these messages.